Good evening. Welcome along, folks. 33 years in 31 days, day 17. Looking at the year 2006. I can see Jenny, you're in here already. Good evening. Welcome along. So, here we are, 2006. Just to recap from yesterday, you'll know that I had transferred into Cheshire Police. They'd abandoned and cast to one side all my road policing skills and experience and put me on a very basic investigation team looking at run-of-the-mill arrests, shoplifters, minor drug possession, domestic assaults, those kind of things, straightforward, generally fairly simple matters to process and deal with. And that's where I was. Good team of people, and I was working out of Crewe Police Station, which was a bit of a weird place. Bit of an odd place, Crewe Police Station. It was sort of a modern-ish sort of building, but internally felt like it was from years before. The cell block was very archaic and old-fashioned compared to what I'd been used to at Elizabeth Slinger Road in Manchester. But I was working there. However, in 2006, in Cheshire Police, something quite unique happened, and that was that they opened 3 purpose-made, custom-built custody suites. One in Blacon in Chester, one in Manor Park in Runcorn, and one at Middlewich. And the one at Middlewich was the one that would cover the east of the county, and it was sort of centrally located so that it could accept prisoners from Wimslow and Macclesfield areas and Congleton, but also accept prisoners from Northwich and Winsford and Crewe and Nantwich and all that kind of stuff. So big catchment area. Big question mark at the time was how far people were going to have to travel once they'd been arrested, and how long cops were going to be out of the loop for a while they were trying to process, get prisoners to custody and so on. But what they did is they arranged a contract at that time so that if the TPT officers that we discussed yesterday, who just go to jobs and go, oh, well, I can just arrest you because it's dead easy and I don't have to worry about how hard or messy it is to deal with it, hand forth, a long way away, exactly. Don't have to deal with this prisoner, I can just arrest it, fill a few sheets of paper in and let somebody else sort all the mess out, which was de-skilling them. But in order to try and keep those cops on their area, they developed a contract with the people who had been part and parcel of the building of the custody suites, and the police sort of, they weren't police staff that worked in the custody suites. The police officers worked there, the custody sergeants were police officers, but the jailer and detention staff were owned by a company called GSL, Global Solutions Limited. And they also had vans, and they had vans out in the areas, and the bobbies would shout up and say, we've got somebody to go, and the van would go pick up the prisoner and bring them into custody. And sometimes that van might do 4 or 5 stops before it got to custody. So sometimes some people were sat in the back of a van for quite some considerable time. So it wasn't perfect in any way, but that's what we had and that's what we're doing. Middlewich opened up, though. We moved into Middlewich and we operated out of Middlewich. Now, as you can imagine, we've gone from Crewe Police Station, where they had, I don't know, maybe 8 cells, maybe 10 cells, something like that. Very small suite, nothing much. Wimslow had a custody suite which operated there as well. And there was a time where Congleton had a custody suite as well. All closed, mothballed. Wimslow was always mothballed and reopened on New Year's Eve, just to add extra capacity, but the others were finished, gone. Crewe never opened again. But as you can imagine, we've now got a suite at Middlewich with 35 cells. 35 cells. And my first tour of duty on the custody investigation team at Middlewich Custody Suite was the Saturday morning after the first Friday night. And so the Bobbies had clearly seen it as a great opportunity to fill custody. They locked up left, right, and centre, the whole custody suite. So I came in the morning, the custody suite was full, but the sergeant for the custody investigation team worked Monday to Friday. So at the weekends we were on our own. And I arrived and they were in utter meltdown. It's probably one of the first things that I ever did that made me sort of think, made me to started to have me thinking and acting like a sergeant, because I got a grip of all the files, got a grip of all the investigations, started dishing work out and saying, can you sort that out? I'm doing this. I'm trying to speak to CID to see if they can pick this up. It was a nightmare. At the end of the day, it was like, but it moved on. Things got a little bit better, but that's where we're at Middlewich. So I'm now into 2016. As you'll know, in December 2005, I sat part 2 of the sergeant's exam, and I was waiting in 2006 for the result. And the result was that I passed it. It's one of those odd occasions where I came out of it and I thought, I can't do any more than that. I have to have passed it. I can't not have passed that. I was there with everything. I was so confident that I'd passed. And only in the back of my mind was thinking, if I haven't passed, I'm spent. I've got nothing more to give. Anyway, I passed, which was great. Very satisfying to know that you've done that. Of course, then nowadays the sergeant's promotion process is immense, and even when you're promoted, there's a 12-month sort of assessment and evaluation period that they go through. It's awful. I had to have a board interview. I went on the board interview. I passed. I was selected for promotion. What they told me, though, was that I was towards the back end of those who'd been agreed for promotion. So I should anticipate to get promoted within the next 9 to 12 months, not immediately. They added that if I didn't get promoted within 12 months, I would be back to square one, not for the exams, but with boards and preparation and all that. I'd have to do that all again. Didn't fill me with a great deal of confidence at all. So I was in custody. I was working in custody. The superintendent that was in charge of custody at the time and was overseeing this new contract, which wasn't working very well, was a chap called Craig Guilford. And Superintendent Guilford spoke to me on a number of occasions about promotion. He talked to me about my board, coached me a little bit for my board interview, and then he just sort of casually asked at one point, he said, so, you know, if you get through the boards, what do you want to do? And I said, well, to be quite honest, boss, I'd happily go straight downstairs into the cells, because I understand the environment. I know how it works. I know what shift pattern they work. I know what time I start, what time I finish. I see that it's an interesting role, and I'm going in with my feet firmly placed on the floor because I know how everything works here. Oh, right. Very good. The second thing that worked in my favour is that really nobody wanted to work in custody. So you were sort of taking on a bit of a poison chalice in many people's view. So it should have been an easy position for me to fill. The situation rolled on. I was waiting for notification that I was going to get promoted, and then Mr. Guilford had said to me that preferences were going out, and he said, let me know when you put your preferences in. I said, I've not heard anything. He said, well, when you do, it's going to happen. Let me know what your preferences are. So my preferences came up, and you could choose going to TPT, going to custody, or just applying for anything that comes up and in a melting pot with everybody else, and you get it or you don't. Depends on how your face fits. So I just, on my 3 things, I just put custody, custody, custody. Didn't put anything else. I just put all 3 options. I want to go to custody. Then, whilst working in the custody investigation team, there's a morning where I'm sat there and the inspector that's looking after the department comes over to visit. He worked at a different police station, but he pops over to visit and he wants to have a meeting with me. So he drags me off into this other office and he says, "We've had a chat, we've had a discussion, blah, 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 blah. So-and-so is not going to be here for a while. We need somebody to step into their shoes and take on an acting position as sergeant in the custody investigation team. And I think you're the person to do it. Are you willing to do it? Are you ready to do it? And what have you?" I said, "Of course I will. Yes, I'd love to do that." I was a little bit unsure about supervising the people that I actually work with as a PC. And when the acting spell finishes, you go back to working with them. It's always a very difficult situation, that. But I said, yes, I'll do that. And he said, "Great. Well," he said, "we'll get everything set up." He said, "I'll be looking at you starting a week on Monday or whatever." So I went back into the office and I sat down at my desk and I was doing my work and all the rest of it, and thinking, "Crikey, I'm going to go acting. How's that going to work?" And all the rest of it. And then he sticks his head back in the door and he says, "Neil, I need another word." Oh, right. So I got up, walked out, went back into this sort of meeting room, sat down. He said, "I've just had a phone call from Superintendent Guildford and he's put a block on you going acting and won't allow it." I was like, there was only a few seconds between him then carrying on with the sentence, but what seemed like an eternity just opened up there, because I'm like, so many unanswered questions. Why is Mr. Guildford putting a block on me going acting? Why? There were so many unanswers, and I just didn't understand it. But he carried on to say, he says, "Mr. Guildford has put a block on you going acting and won't allow it." And I think all I managed to utter was, "Oh, why?" With a whole million things going through my head. And he said, "Because he's promoting you from Monday and you're going downstairs." Boom. So I never actually acted. I went from being offered an acting position to 10 minutes later being told I couldn't have it because I was being promoted. One of the chaps that I used to work with in the department, who knew Mr. Guildford very well, when I'd spoke to him and said I want to go to custody, and Mr. Guildford was quite keen on me sort of going to custody, he said at that point, he said, "That's it, you're promoted then, because what Mr. Guildford wants, Mr. Guildford gets, and he will sort it out and make it happen. You will get promoted." Nothing happened, but then it did. So the block was put on me going acting because I was going to be promoted. So that was a nice time, and I'd actually short-circuited the process by about 6 months. They'd said 9 to 12 months to get promoted. I managed it in May, June, July, August, September. 5. I did it in 5. So I'd done really well in getting promoted. And my understanding is that it's better to have somebody coming into custody who wants to be there rather than somebody who's being dragged in kicking and screaming. So I understand and I imagine that Mr. Guildford went to HR and said, "Right, I need 3 for custody and I want him, her, and him. Sergeant Jewson Smith, PC Jewson Smith, I want him." And so I leapfrogged through the system because I was happy to go to custody. So that was good news. Just as a slight anecdote, Mr. Guildford eventually left the custody team. He went off to manage one of the BCUs on the force, and then he disappeared and went to Gwent. And if you're up on police officers and senior officers around the country, Mr. Guildford is now the Chief Constable of Nottinghamshire. And I have to say that on one of the years where I was trying to get all the forces involved with Don't Stream and Drive, I emailed him direct and said, "You're the only person that I know in Nottinghamshire, and I know that we've got a connection. And if you can get some bam, happened." So there we go. That was that. Got promoted. The one thing that I did do before I got promoted is that people knew that I was being promoted. They knew I was going downstairs. There was a sergeant downstairs that I was replacing, whose surname was Boycott, and he just happens, just as another anecdote, happened to be married to a lady who later went on to leave Cheshire Police and went to West Midlands Police as an assistant chief constable, and has done very well with her career. She spent time in America doing stuff in America as well, so she's had a great career. But I was replacing her husband in custody. And I went down one day and I was stood downstairs behind the charge desk, and a prisoner arrived in the holding area, and they looked and said, "Why don't you book this person in?" So I looked and said, "Well, I can't because I'm not promoted yet." And they said, no, there's nothing to stop you booking them in. He said, "It just needs a sergeant to authorise detention. So, book them in." So before I was actually sergeant, we sat down at the desk, the prisoner came in, sergeant stood just over my shoulder because I was using his machine and his login and all the rest of it, and off we went. Booked in the prisoner, got to the appropriate point, and I'd seen it done so many times, it was just clockwork for me. But it got to the appropriate point where the sergeant then said, "Okay, I've heard everything that's been said. This officer is doing all the computer stuff, but I'm authorising your detention to investigate the matters you've been arrested for, blah, 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 blah." And that was done. So I booked in my first prisoner before I was even promoted. And the interesting thing that came out of that was that I can't remember, I think they'd come in for something really simple like a public order offence. And the CIT sergeant, the custody investigation team sergeant, was looking for me and rang downstairs and said, "There's a prisoner coming in from crew for public order, and he's kneeled down there because it should be a quick job. If the handover's ready, he can pick it up." And the sergeant was on the phone. He said, "I think you might have to find somebody else to pick up that prisoner." And she's like, "Why?" He said, "Neil's booked him in, so he can't do the investigation." And I went back upstairs. She was like, and he said, "You booked him in." I said, "Yeah, sorry." So there we go. In September 2006, I was promoted, and I moved from custody investigation upstairs to the cells downstairs. Went to work with a brilliant team of people who helped me out, showed me the ropes, taught me everything I needed to know, and then I progressed on from there, and we'll talk more about time in custody tomorrow, but started to sort of build up my experience down there and started booking people in and making decisions about charging and referrals to CPS and all those kind of things. But that was 2006. So you see, brave in spirit, you're here again. Good to see you along. Ruth, nice to have you. Jenny, who else have we got? Jenny, Ruth, Andrea, I've seen you as well. Good evening, welcome along. So Ruth's asking, do some people act up several times before getting a permanent promotion? Most of the time, yes. Most of the time, they get an opportunity to act or become temporary in the position before they actually get promoted. Gives them valuable experience and stuff for their boards that they're going to do later, where they say, "Can you give an example where you've had to deal with conflict and da-di-da in a supervisory capacity?" And you think, no, because I'm a PC and I don't supervise anybody. So where am I going to get that experience from? If they've been acting, they get that. As it was, I'd gone through everything. I was just waiting for an appointment. But I sort of leapfrogged the process because I was wanted voluntarily to take on a role that wasn't very popular and people didn't want to do. So that's how I evaded having to do any acting. Because I just got promoted quickly, which was great. Love him or hate him, I'm eternally grateful to Mr. Guildford for actually just sort of taking that up and running with that and making that process really smooth for me. So that's that, 2006. Thank you all for dropping in. That's all for tonight. Tomorrow, day 18, we're looking at 2007. Just having a look at my notes here. More about custody, some of the things that we saw in custody and some of the things that would go on. and there's lots of stuff about custody that is difficult. It all blurs into one. And there's the only the odd thing that stands out. And sometimes I find like this where I'm talking, I'll be talking about something, and go, oh yeah, what about that? It takes talking about it to actually start firing off other memories that sort of then pop out and come back to mind. So who knows what might happen over the next few days as I start looking at stuff. But anyway, that is all for now. 2006 over and done with. Thanks for being here. Replay viewers, if you come along and you've got this far, thank you for sticking with us. Hope to see you tomorrow on day 18, looking at 2007. Till then, have a safe evening. Take care. Be safe. And I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.